Okay, so we're picking back up the last part of day 80 here. So this is our unit review for the unit test. So we'll go through the major points, follow along with your worksheets. And if you have any questions, let me know. Yeah, there's the assignment that you're supposed to let me know some stuff. So um, first thing that we looked at was intro to animals, characteristics and type of animals, the functions they need to survive, body plans, radial versus bilateral, and then kind of some things on there. So if we look at kind of body plans here, um, we're going to kind of jump ahead a little bit here. So radial, again, is kind of that cross section where you've got kind of one spindle through, and you can split it in a bunch of different ways where you end up with two mirror halves. With bilateral, there's really only one way you can run that plane through and end up with two mirrors halves. So bilateral bi is two-sided, so two-sided there. And then we had kind of jumping back and forth here. So we had protostomes versus deuterostomes. You can see those down here. So remember, as we go from one cell, two cell, four cell, 8, 16, and so on and so on. And eventually you get this area called the blastopore. And on one group of animals, that blastopore forms a mouth with the anus at the other end. And the other group, the blastopore, forms the anus first and the mouth at the other end there. And we are in this group, the deuterostome groups there. So major kind of animal groups, we've got multicellular, eukaryotic organisms with axial walls, and we have the invertebrates, and then we have the vertebrates or the chordates, and then the animal survival depends on these kind of four things here: maintaining homeostasis, getting oxygen and nutrients, eliminating carbon dioxide and waste, and reproducing. And that's where we kind of look at the other things. And again, there's kind of the key terms on there for our terms. Then we looked at animal systems, so kind of overview feeding and digestion. So there's several different ways. You can kind of have fluid just kind of go through, like a sponge. You can have a single opening, like a cnidarian with just kind of one slash mouth anus, where you can have the passageway, that protostome, deuterostome tube that kind of goes all the way through, like us. There's different types of respiration that can occur, so like spiracles, in insects, or we can have things like lungs or reptiles or mammals. Not on here was fish, but you can have like gills on fish as well. Then we've got different types of circulation. So we can have open circulatory systems where the blood is sometimes enclosed in blood vessels and sometimes just kind of floating free in what they call sinuses, which is kind of these open space like the abdomen of insects. And other times, or in other groups of animals, we have what we call closed circulation. So we've got a heart-like pump, and then capillaries, and then arteries and veins kind of going all the way through. Excretion is how we get rid of waste. So in like insects or arthropods, they have these things called Malpighian tubules. In humans, we've got things like kidneys, bladder, urethra, and so on. Then we looked at movement and support, so we can have different ways that we support the body. So like sea stars have what we call the hydrostatic skeleton with water in it. Or you can have insects with like an exoskeleton and the muscles on the inside. Or we can have an endoskeleton with a rigid part in the very center and then the muscles on the outside, right? But in both cases, they provide a hinge movement, can move off of those hinges there. Reproduction, we have internal fertilization or external fertilization, right? And then homeostasis is kind of this static or balanced of things internally, right? And all of these things have to be worked in somehow to maintain homeostasis. All right. There's kind of our key concepts, describe different ways animals feed, describe the characteristics of respiratory system, open and closed circulation, animals manage and eliminate waste, respond to stimuli, skeleton and muscles, asexual and sexual reproducers, maintain homeostasis. We didn't really get to this one, but we'll get to that later when we get to the nervous system. And again, kind of the key terms, you can see them listed over on the side there. All right, so one thing that is worth noting is body systems in humans, so structures and functions. So we do have nervous system, integumentary system, immune and lymphatic system, muscular system, circulatory system, skeletal system, respiratory system, digestive system, excretory system, endocrine system, and reproductive system. Right, so you've got all these structures you should be familiar with and the major functions that go along with each one. Okay. So kind of looking again, getting a little more detail, skeletal and muscular systems. So in the skeletal divisions, we have the axial skeleton, which is in blue in this image, and the appendicular skeleton, which is kind of the yellow color. You should know the major bones from the skull at the top all the way through the phalanges, the toes, and the bottom. carpals, metacarpals, femurs, radius, ulnus, all that should be something you should be able to identify. So axial skeleton, appendicular skeleton, bone composition. So we talked about spongy bone, compact bone, the periosteal layer on the outside there. Types of joints. I don't think I have an image for the types of joints, but there was 4 types of joints that we looked at: hinge, ball, and socket, for example. Should be familiar with them and where they are. Types of muscle tissues. These are muscle tissue, skeletal tissue, smooth muscle tissue, and cardiac tissue. I don't have an image for muscle contraction, but you should be familiar with that sliding filament model. And then major muscle groups. Again, you should be familiar with all the major muscle groups that kind of happen across the body. On the front, our anterior end, and across the back, our posterior end. Traps, delts, lats, biceps, triceps, quads, gastrocnemius, hamstring, glutes, all that should be able to identify that on a question. Okay. So here we can see skeleton supports the body, protects internal organs, assists movement, stores minerals like calcium, site of red blood blood formation. Joints contain connective tissue to hold bones together. We have those 3 muscle types, and actin and myosin for the muscle model there. And the skeletal muscles generate force and produce movement and pulling up things. You can see on here axial skeleton, appendicular skeleton. You should know those bones, and you should know all those major muscle groups. All right. Nervous system. So we looked at the parts of a neuron, an individual neuron, to kind of see how that was put together. One with the dendrites, the cell body, axon, and axon terminal kind of being the main parts. And we looked at how nerves were transmitted. So we had the chemical part, the electrical part kind of going along the axon, chemical part, those neurotransmitters, and then the electrical part kind of picking back up in the dendrite. We looked at the central nervous system with the brain and spinal cord and the kind of the major lobes of the brain. And then we looked at kind of all the different functions of the peripheral nervous system. We broke it down into cranial and spinal nerves, but then we said really kind of it's functional. How's it doing stuff? It's got sensory neurons that detect the world around it. It's got the motor neurons that send the signal out to the body to do different things. Then it's broken up: somatic, autonomic, and then sympathetic and parasympathetic. Okay. So again, this is key ideas. The nervous system collects information. Impulses begin where it's stimulated. Nervous system is composed of the brain and spinal cord, the central nervous system, and the peripheral nervous system is sensory and motor divisions, and so on. You can see key things there as well. We did the nerve and muscle lab. That was really just to kind of reinforce those concepts. And then circulatory and respiratory systems. We talked about kind of the functions of it was to get nutrients and waste and oxygen and carbon dioxide to all the right spots, or get rid of them from the right spots. We talked about the structure of the heart with the 4 chambers: right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle. We want to know the flow of blood as it goes through, right? Heart, lungs, back to heart, back to body. Blood vessels, we talked about arteries, capillaries, veins, and blood flow relative to the heart. We looked at the pulmonary system, which is where the blood goes out to the lungs to drop off carbon dioxide and pick up oxygen. And then the systemic circulation, where it does the reverse, it drops off oxygen for cells to use and picks up carbon dioxide as waste. We looked at blood components like red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. We looked a little bit about blood clotting as well, how that occurs. And then we got into the respiratory system: nose, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, and then the alveolar sacs with the alveoli and the actual gas exchange occurring across those particular regions. All right, so here you can see our key concepts: transport oxygen, nutrients, other substance, blood flows, 3 types of blood vessels, blood plasma, red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets, and the respiratory system picks those up. And then again, we've got our key terms on the right, so you can look at those. All right, then we look at digestive and excretory systems. So the digestive system was that alimentary canal going from esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, rectum, and anus. And then we had all the supplementary things that were going on there as well: the liver, gallbladder, pancreas, spleen, kind of connected to that. Then we got into the excretory system: skin, lung, liver, and kidneys. And we mostly functioned on kind of the urinary part of that, which is the kidneys, the ureter, the bladder, and then the urethra. And the kidneys, again, remember, filter blood. So as blood comes in, the kidneys filter that blood and remove the waste and keep the stuff that they want to keep. All right, digestive system converts big molecules into little molecules that we can absorb. Food is processed in 4 stages: ingestion, digestion, absorption, and elimination. And then during digestion, food travels through the mouth, esophagus, stomach, and small intestine, and then excretory system, include those different things that we looked at those as well. And then endocrine and reproductive systems. So we talked about this major idea being that we have cells that secrete hormones that get into the bloodstream and go to target cells. We mentioned the endo versus exocrine glands, things that go outside of the body versus inside of the body. And then we looked at examples of endocrine glands. And there's a bunch of them, but we picked just 4 of them to kind of focus on there. And then we looked at sexual development as a result of those hormones, and that led us into male and female reproductive structures. She should be familiar with those, and then fertilization and development were kind of the end part of it. Okay, and again, our key ideas: endocrine system is made up of glands that release hormones into the body. Reproductive system functions in males to produce and deliver sperm, and in females to produce eggs and prepare the body to nourish an embryo. And then during fertilization, eggs and sperm fuse to produce that zygote, that's that first fertilized egg. So you can see the key terms over there. You can look at all of those. And then kind of some other resources for you is we have a bunch of Quizlet pages that you can go to look at kind of all the terms from the unit. I've kind of broken them up into mix. They might be off a little bit in terms of the numbers on there, but they're pretty close in terms of kind of what we're looking at. And then finally, recommend studying on your own. Complete questions on me for the discussion part, and then remember to complete so I just mentioned discussion assignment there. All right, and I think that gets us to the end. So, all right, and that concludes day 80. Thank you for listening.